pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for November 3rd, 2017. Big day in the U.S. soccer, behind the scenes in the court system. And to talk about NASL, USL, MLS, some and all of its parts, Kartik Krishnaiyer. Kartik, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Kevin. How are you?
Pretty good.
Kartik, I guess the way to start this interview is to just ask you outright, tell us what is happening today for those that are not entirely sure, and why is it important?
Yeah, it's a critical day in terms of the NASL's ability to continue. Obviously, there is an antitrust lawsuit the NASL has filed against the United States Soccer Federation that they filed after they were notified that they had been denied Division II sanctioning, Division II status for the 2018 season. They're currently a Division II, have been a Division II sanctioned independent Division II league since 2011. So they turned around and filed an antitrust lawsuit against the United States Soccer Federation, alleging some degree of collusion between U.S. soccer, Major League Soccer, and USL, which NASL assumes will be given second division status. The USL is currently a provisional second division. However, USL has not been given D2 status yet for 2018, and my understanding is that process, it's running a little bit of a different course than the NASL process, where the NASL was flat out rejected because they didn't meet the number of teams or the time zone requirement based on their application for 2018, whereas USL met those requirements but then have some issues where they would need a significant amount of waivers with their clubs. So they have not been given D2 status either yet. But NASL went ahead and jumped ahead of waiting to see what happened with USL, filed this lawsuit, and if they don't get a temporary injunction today, or actually it would be an injunction because the judge, she upgraded the potential for this. They claim they will not be able to continue and do business, that they have to be a Division II league to continue. There's some question whether that's actually true or if that's posturing for media consumption and for the court.
Kartik, my understanding of the legal arguments that were made earlier this week and in the filing that was put out there is that this litigation could last several years, 2-3 years. You know how the courts will work in this case. And in essence, what the NASL is really doing here is looking for this judge through this injunction to basically overturn the decision, to sort of, take a shortcut to what they want ultimately, to bide them more time so that they can maybe meet those requirements or hope to negotiate something behind the scenes. Is that somewhat of a fair summary of what's happening here?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely it. I think you've nailed it, because my understanding is that the NASL, they'll worry about the components of the actual antitrust case at a later date. They want to get the injunction to get some breathing room, and then either get enough teams to meet those Division II professional league standards that they're questioning for next season and onward, and then maybe negotiate some sort of settlement with U.S. Soccer in the process. But getting the injunction, it seems like the case may have been filed. This lawsuit might have been filed, guys, just to get the preliminary injunction, and then to have the breathing room that gave them. Now, whether they pursue the case, I think there are an owner or two in NASL that probably want to pursue the case to its finality. But there are probably some other owners who are just saying, hey, we need the temporary relief, and then we have time mandated by the court system to get our house in order, where we would maintain Division II status based on an injunction. And at that point, we should take all the necessary steps to solidify ourselves and ensure this doesn't happen again.
Now, when we're looking at the other side of that story, if today that injunction is denied, where does that leave the NASL?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, they say that leaves them out of business. I'm not convinced of that. I think that there are obvious road maps back to where they want to be. Dropping to a Division III league, the most obvious one is what USL did when they were dropped from Division II to Division III, and contemplated all these same things, lawsuits, all of that against U.S. Soccer. Eventually just kind of consolidated as a Division III league and worked their way back up to Division II. Now, what the NASL would allege is that they made their way back up to Division II with the aid of MLS after they signed an affiliate agreement with MLS to host some reserve teams, and then also have affiliate agreements between clubs like Ottawa is an affiliate of Montreal now, although that just happened this year, right? Because Ottawa was in NASL previous to this season. But that sort of thing, right? That would be the allegation NASL would make is, yes, on the surface it appears like it doesn't do that much damage or injure your business because USL was able to do that, but USL did it with the aid of MLS, which is exactly what we're alleging to begin with as far as collusion and a conspiracy against us.
Now, practically, Kartik, is it really important to have that tag of Division 2, Division 3? The amount of team won't change. You'll have 8 to 10 team if possible, with the NPSL team making the transition for next year if that happens. Could it just exist without having a tag to their league?
Yeah, I've always thought that. I mean, I've been pretty consistent on this, although obviously there's a lot of evidence to the contrary given both by USL and NASL as to why they wanted that Division II label. But I've always felt it's semantics in a system without promotion and relegation. I think the marketplace has kind of defined a delineation between Major League Soccer and everybody else. And you're in that everybody else category, whether you're at Division II, Division III, or Division IV. And NASL's in that everybody else category, and they've got some anchors in the New York Cosmos and Miami FC that have, for various reasons, created a global splash and have some branding behind them, and very, very powerful and wealthy owners who, at least in the case of Miami FC's owner, Ricardo Silva, are connected to the global game. And in the case of New York Cosmos owner Rocco Camiso, a guy who seems to be willing to spend whatever it takes within the U.S. soccer system to try and make an impact. And the assumption is that he's bankrolling this lawsuit, and he's bankrolling a lot of NASL's pursuits of going after U.S. soccer at this point.
You brought up the elephant in the matchbox, promotion and relegation. Of course, there is the concurrent lawsuit that is happening as well to try and force promotion and relegation that was brought forth by FC Miami's owner, and I forget the name of the fourth division team. Forgive me, Kingston or something, I believe. But anyway,
Kingston
yes,
Stockade.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah. How much is this tied into the other? There were some interesting arguments that sort of spoke to that. The judge said that just because the rest of the world does something somewhere doesn't really play a role in whether it's illegal to do in the United States. The antitrust law will supersede anything else in the rest of the world, which makes sense. Those statements have made me believe that if this fails, that's a good indication that that lawsuit might be dead in the water too. Is there any tie in there? Is there any assumptions that you can build from the decision that comes down today to that lawsuit as well?
No, in fact, I think that a lot of legal scholars I talk to believe the two, well, this is a lawsuit and that's a claim with the CAS, contradict each other.
Sure. Because
the relief the NASL is seeking in this case is obviously temporarily to stay as a Division II, but long-term, if they win the lawsuit, the pro league standards be thrown out and there be no divisional designations. Now, what Kingston and Miami seem to be seeking, and Miami is an NASL member, but the NASL is not a party to that claim. What Kingston Stockade and Miami FC seem to be seeking is a clear mandate from FIFA or from the Court of Arbitration on Sports that U.S. Soccer has to enforce their divisional designations, which means promotion and relegation between 1, 2, 3, and 4, which this lawsuit doesn't seem to seems to do the opposite. And that's what is inherently odd to me, because obviously Miami FC is an NASL member, so they are part of this lawsuit. they have also filed this separate claim, which the league, I should point out in fairness to my questioning on this, has said that they are not a party to that CAS claim. That's an independent claim made by Miami FC and by Kingston, and Kingston has the backing. NPSL, as a league, Kingston's in NPSL, has come out and publicly supported Kingston's claim on that. NASL has not put out a similar statement on Miami FC, and I've been told by NASL they will not. So it's interesting. This lawsuit could fail, that could succeed, and you have a completely different playing field. Similarly, just as much of a chance that CAS claim gets denied by the Court of Arbitration on Sports, this goes into effect, and then you have no divisional designations, and ultimately you have no framework for promotion and relegation long term if that happens. So it's confusing. And I mean, a lot of what I've just told you is speculation and based on conversations I've had. No one really knows whether maybe there is a correlation between the two cases, but it's confusing, and I think it's a situation where NASL and NASL owners just want to see things change, and they want to see things change quickly, and they've gone ahead and thrown a bunch of things against the wall, some of which might stick.
Now, if we project ourselves in the future, Kartik, and you want to predict how the next 5 months are going to unfold, where will NASL be in March of 2018 when the spring season is supposed to start?
Yeah, I'm inclined to think they're going to get this injunction today, although I have to say I'm less confident about that after the actual preliminary hearing on Tuesday than I was before. I had based my my analysis on the filings and the pre-hearing documents that were available to everybody, and talking to other reporters, they've come across the same way, where they thought it leaned heavily in the NASL's favor, and then after the hearing, think it's just kind of a slight NASL advantage now. But I think the NASL probably, I'd say there's a 55% chance they get this injunction today. I mean, if that happens, they kick off in March as a Division II league with this injunction. I would say from somewhere between 10 to 12 teams. I am under the assumption that the North Carolina team, will be leaving the league, as Jeffrey Kessler said in court. And I also believe, based on my conversations, that FC Edmonton will be moving on to the CanPL. Duane, you would know more about that than anyone, probably. But I believe FC Edmonton will not be one of those teams that kick off in NASL next year. And for me personally, I think it's a good move. My personal opinion, it's a good move for them if they do make that move.
Okay, we've mentioned Miami a lot in this conversation. The Cosmos obviously stand out as well in the NASL over the course of the history in terms of the expenditure that they put out there. They're just kind of at a different level, both of those clubs at many times, well, Miami more so now than the Cosmos. How much of this is being driven by those two entities, and how much of this really is a collective? Is there a chance? We've seen other teams in NASL move and make the jump to USL. North Carolina is going to do it this year. How much do you think that really this is just a couple big egos that are driving a lot of this stuff?
Oh, you don't want to make that assumption without cause, but everything I have looked at, everybody I've talked to points to it being those two teams, and that the other teams are kind of just along for the ride. Maybe they share the vision, but they don't have the resources or the bully pulpit or whatever. But with the exception of North Carolina, with the exception of Edmonton, who I think we've said both those teams are leaving the league and going to other destinations. This is a New York, Miami-driven thing, and I want to remind the listeners that New York and Miami are disproportionately large markets for a Division II league. I mean, they're huge metropolitan areas, top 10 metro areas in the United States. Both of them. New York's obviously number one. Miami's like 6 or 7. So it's tough to have Division II teams in those markets, and I think both those teams want to be a Division I league, in Division I eventually. New York by virtue of getting divisional designations removed, Miami by virtue of promotion and relegation. So I would agree. I think those two teams are driving the train, and while I had wanted to and I pushed back against the assumption that was the reality a couple months ago when all of this started, and said, look, it's an 8-team league, it's a 10-team league with expansion members, etc. Don't just pin it on one or two teams. But everything I have read and everybody I've spoken to points to it being those two teams.
Now, in the world of football in North America, we have like those two antagonists. We have MLS, some USL on one side, NASL on the other, that has a different kind of attitude. And one thing in this life that is hard to do is admit mistake, admit fault, and move on from there and say, you know what, we made a mistake, or you know what, we were both not right or wrong, but let's move forward and work together. How probable is it that people around that table decide to work together?
At this point, I don't think it's probable at all. I mean, I thought it might have been 6 months ago when the NASL was striking a different tone. But and when I had gotten wind of some tension between Major League Soccer and USL, which I believe still exists. But right now they have a common enemy, right? They're fighting NASL because NASL has filed a lawsuit. I think it's very, very difficult for these two parties or three parties, however many parties you want to look at it. If you want to look at some and USSF as separate parties, but they're separate parties with kind of a joint interest in this. To sit down with NASL at this point. The sale of the New York Cosmos by Seamus O'Brien and Sella Sports to Rocco Commisso seems to have been a definitive shift in the ability. Now, while the Cosmos were talking big this whole time and harbored their ambitions of being a challenger to MLS, I think there were back channel contacts there. I still believe there might be some back channel contacts from Silva's group to MLS. But Commisso doesn't seem to have any relationship with U.S. Soccer or Major League Soccer other than an antagonistic one. And he's now the chairman of the board of governors of NASL. So I just don't think the two parties are going to sit down and hash out anything, which is unfortunate, quite frankly, for the sport in North America.
Well, that's a perfect way to end it. And Kartik, for those that don't know, you have a history with NASL back in the early days. You're not there anymore, but certainly an affinity at some level, I'm sure, still there, and a long-term relationship with American soccer and American club soccer. So let's talk big picture to end this conversation. And what, in your mind, as someone who's experienced that league close up, would U.S. soccer lose, North American soccer lose, if the NASL does, in fact, go away today?
Yeah, my thinking on this has evolved. I thought when they got denied Division II status September 1st that it would be okay, right? 2 months ago, what would happen is the teams would fold into USL and we would move on. What I've seen since, and you guys may not be able to relate to this up there because you haven't been qualifying for World Cups recently, but the U.S. has been an automatic, as you know, just kind of a shoo-in from CONCACAF. U.S. misses a World Cup, and I realized at that point, as do many other people, that the NASL and some sort of independent league outside of the kind of Soccer United marketing purview is critical to pushing the envelope because what's happened is the U.S. has fallen into a malaise of complacency that led directly to a failure, right? Finishing fifth in the Hex, which is an undeniable fact, an undeniable reality of where the U.S. is now after having finished first in the Hex each of the last three qualifying cycles. So I think that what the U.S. would lose, or what North American soccer would lose, is an independent league on the outside, challenging MLS, challenging Soccer United marketing, willing to do some of the things experimentally that might benefit the United States trying to recover from this failure, and Canada as they try and build Octavio Zambrano's national team tries to build towards making the Hex next time, which I think Canada's progress from my outsider's perspective has been pretty good since Zambrano took over, and maybe they'll be there. But you lose that independent voice and that league that's willing to experiment and do things and not put club profits of clubs and of a league over the general interest of soccer. So that's what I would say.
Kartik, thank you very much for your time today. Where can the listeners find you on social media?
Yeah, KKFLA737 on Twitter. Follow me. I spent a lot on the USSF presidential election yesterday with some questioning of Eric Winalda, et cetera, who's one of the candidates. But general soccer follow.
Kartik, have a great day, and thank you very much as always.
Yeah, thanks always, guys.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane, there was a playoff game last night that ended up being a deuce by deuce and a result for Seattle moving into the conference finals of the Western Conference. But before that, I wanted to tell you a little story about Patrice Evra. Did you know that Patrice Evra pulled a Cantona yesterday?
No, I did not.
Well, he was the first player ever in Europa League to be sent off without even having starting the game. He got sent off in the warm-up. Patrice Evra of Olympique de Marseille, OM, was on the field getting warm up, and he starts getting into a heated argument with one of his own supporters. He crosses that barrier close to the supporters, and start to be a scuffle and an argument. And then you see Patrice Evra roundhouse kick the head of a supporter, gets sent off, but because he was only written as a sub on the game, Marseille were able to start the game at 11, but Patrice Evra getting sent off before a game.
Yeah. What is it with French players that have played for United or are playing for United and kicking fans every 20 years or so?
But he had good form. Like I don't know if Patrice Evra ever played, ever did any taekwondo or martial arts, but he had some good form on that roundhouse.
Do you think GSP for his returning? I think GSP.
Yeah, that's topical.
Have his ass handed to him on Saturday.
Well, you're topical,
yeah.
Duane. Nah, it's not gonna happen. He's gonna take him down. He's gonna rub his elbows to his face, and he'll be done in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think this is a mistake, but that's for the non-existent MMA podcast.
Don't get me started. I'll pull off my famous GSP interview.
There you go.
My impression that yes, I am not impressed by your performance, Duane. You know, yes, you crazy in the head, man.
There you go. All right, I am going. I'll tell you what on that one. I am. I'm going to watch it because that's what we do. It's going to be. It's almost been a decade though, man. Like just stay retired. Anyhow,
it's been 4 years.
Jeez.
Not even 3.5, but yes, let's talk about soccer.
Seems like a decade, yeah. Anyway, enough of this. I'm hardly an MMA expert, but Vancouver, Seattle last night, as you say, a deuce, if you want to go with that. Look, a lot of criticism being levied towards the approach that Vancouver took in the first leg, and now hindsight is 20/20, of course, but to not go for the throat against an undermanned Seattle team. A
wounded Seattle team.
Yeah, it seemed like a mistake to me at the time, although I convinced myself, if you look back to the archives and listen to us, I did make the argument for how it might be a good thing for Vancouver, but you got to win your home stuff. You do. And to play as conservatively as they did, only one shot on target through 2 games, that's just not good enough. And as I tweeted out last night, I tweeted out, the 2017 Vancouver Whitecaps were ... fine. They were just fine. Not inspiring, not bad, just fine.
Yeah, and they were fine.
I don't know. Yeah.
Well,
there's really no other way to describe it.
No, I agree, and it's the missed opportunity. I think is a way to say it. It's hard to look at those 2 games because they had a great result against San Jose, but it was San Jose. Like, maybe the worst team ever to make the playoffs in Major League Soccer, with the 2013 Montreal Impact, maybe. When you look at how Vancouver got their success throughout the season, this sums up the season for me. It's at moment you had a surprising result that gave bigger hope and maybe a better perception of this team than it was in reality. And I think Carl Robinson, and I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but in post-game he was talking about, well, Seattle was a better team. And I think he kind of managed his team home and away, knowing that he was the underdog and not trying to get after it. And I think the amount of time Davies played in the second half of the season was a bit disappointing, and you do have a few things for the Whitecaps that are going to change. Montero's on a loan. We don't know if he'll be back, and there's other players like this. What's going to happen to Breck Shea? What's going to happen with other players like Rena and Hurtado? And where does it leave? Where's Oosted's going to be? Because David Oosted's probably not going to be with the Vancouver Whitecaps anymore. He lost his starting job to Marinovic this year. So a lot of turnover for the Whitecaps, and I think it's a bit written on the walls where you had Carl Robinson managing them to trying to get that one opportunity, that one chance, that one set-piece goal, and then trying to bunker down and survive the threat. And I think they never had that chance.
This is a team that was mediocre at best defensively. In fact, you can make an argument that they're below average defensively, the Whitecaps were this year, that attempted to win a 0-0, 1-0, nick them on the counter after resolute defending for a 180-minute series. It doesn't make any sense. Obviously, you got to play to your strengths. So I'm not suggesting that they should have been trying to play tiki-taka here or something. But nonetheless, you got to have some offensive intent at some point during this game. And even when they fell behind 1-0, and it was late too, the 76th minute or something when Dempsey got his first goal, they still didn't really look like they were all that interested in moving forward desperately. You have 15 minutes left to save your season. And not only that, you have 15 minutes left to save your season at that point. And if you got that goal, not only do you save your season, you flip it instantly around because of the away goals rule. But yet there just wasn't anything there at that point. And maybe
there was no chance.
It. And that's,
you talked about that one shot. I was trying to see where that opportunity was going to come from. Where is that shot's going to come from? And Montero had a few opportunities or a few close to opportunities where at one point he's at the 30-yard line. Stephen Fry's off his line. Oh, I'm going to chip him, but he corrects himself, trying to shoot and misses it. Maybe the chip would have been the good idea there. It's like one move, one touch away from a possible chance, I think is the way I would describe the Whitecaps in those two games.
Yeah. Look, well, obviously, we'll get a Vancouver guest on sometime next week and during the break between the rounds for sure to really have a complete analysis. We'll do the same for Montreal as well. Like we do every year, we'll break the season down and look at it in more detail. But the initial gut reaction that I think most of us are having right now is that there was something missing there. It's not like with the Impact, you can look at certain things that went wrong, and a lot went wrong when you missed the playoffs like they did. So you can really more easily.
I think it's easier to look at what went right. It will take a lot less time than it would to notice what went wrong.
Exactly. So the point being though, when it comes to the Whitecaps in this particular case, it's going to be a little more difficult to pinpoint stuff, but it's not there yet. Even when they were top of the West and we were, making jokes about the All-Canadian MLS Cup final, no one, at least from my perspective, outside of the biggest Vancouver partisan, I don't think anyone was really convinced this was a team that was capable of making a run like that. And if they had, you would be looking at them like they were, a team that had gone on some, like the Vancouver Canucks in 1982, to pull a hockey reference off. There's your bingo for the day.
You mean losing in the final?
Losing the final after a miracle run that no one expected nor was replicable.
Wearing a terrible jersey, by the way. Wearing like one of the ugliest jerseys in sports history. Or the
best jerseys. It depends on the perspective, man. Those big Bs are amazing. Stan Smeel for the win.
Sure, they're amazing if you're trying to land an airplane, but not if you're trying to play a hockey game.
Yeah, there you go. Actually, I don't think Stan Smeel was on the team. That was Tiger Williams' team. But anyway, 1982 hockey series are what we're here to talk about in GSP. We're having a nice roundabout conversation
Friday.
here on a Friday.
It's Friday, Duane. It's what used to be the round table.
Exactly. Anyway, the point being, we'll break this down more. But before we do that, bring a guest on and have this conversation in a bigger way. Let's just get the gut feeling on change in Vancouver and whether change is necessary at this point. It's a broken record to talk about whether Larduzzi and the transfer committee and all that stuff needs to change. I think most people would love to see something there. Most people also understand it's not going to happen. So really, the conversation is about Carl Robinson.
Yeah, well,
your initial gut reaction is he safe right now?
I would say he's safe because if you go back to the spring, about 3 weeks before the beginning of the season, 2.5 weeks before Shea and Montero joined the Whitecaps, we were expecting the Whitecaps to be a bottom team in the Western Conference just because of their lack of acquisition, lack of star power, and lack of goals. We were wondering where those goals were coming from. We are still wondering where those goals are coming from. But Carl Robinson was able, with the help of Montero and Breck Shea and Hurtado, and especially Rena in the regular season. He was terrible last night. It was embarrassing. But the regular season, those players had an impact on the club, and the club finished a lot higher than a lot of pundits expected. So for that reason, for the regular season success this year, Carl Robinson is safe for me. Now, if you want to change your fortunes in the playoffs, because the Vancouver Whitecaps only have one playoff victory, and it was a 5-0 against San Jose in their whole history. And you know what, Duane, if we go with Canadian club, you lose your first playoff game, usually a play-in. The year after, you win one. And then the year after, you make a run to the conference finals. No? Isn't that how it works usually for Canadian MLS clubs?
Yeah, well, and if you play another Canadian MLS club, you can take the next step, but you lose in the finals.
Yeah,
so there you
exactly.
go. Yeah. And we'll find out what the next step after that is there in a week or so. It could be bowing out on Sunday. Let's hope not. Well, I know the last Canadian team yet. Anyway, yeah, it comes down to me, and this is probably painting it too simple, and it is painting it too simple, but it's a factor, is it, again, and we've talked about this a million times, so it is a broken record. I'm not going to belabor it right now, but the Whitecaps have never had that's not a lie. They have had a game breaker the year that they won the Western Conference in the regular season. They haven't really since. They were unlucky that year to not get a playoff result. They need to find that game breaker again, and if they can do that, then you can build around that. But until you need to either be very creative and very smart, or very lucky, I suppose, or you have to spend a little bit more money than they are right now. And as MLS brings more and more teams in, and remember, the West is not going to be as soft as it was this year again next year. Dave talked about this yesterday. RSL looks like they're improving. The Galaxy eventually are going to turn around. LAFC is coming in.
And
there's going to be a different West.
It's going to be a different West. You're totally right. But not just that, Duane. When you're looking at the Vancouver Whitecaps, I think their biggest potential for next year is to continue to grow, but to kind of change how that roster is built. And maybe less of players of the same value, a little bit higher DP, a little lower of the rest of the field. You kind of fit Tam and Gam in the middle to build your roster. What I'm saying is, you were talking about that game breaker. I think Vancouver needs a face. I think Vancouver needs a star that's known, that will help the footprint of the team in its own market, to use company terms, or even more than that, help on the field get away from the Whitecaps mentality and truly dominate in this league. And let's not forget too, Duane, the Whitecaps have been unfortunate with some injuries, especially in Matias Laba, that we have seen a big difference since his injury.
Yeah, well, certainly Laba going down did not help. Davies disappeared in the second half of the season, whether that was
he
him
didn't
sort of
play.
running out of steam.
He didn't really play.
Yeah,
it's not his own fault, and I think it's literally the club putting the reins on him. Be like, you know what? We'll calm him down. We don't want to overexert him. We don't want to make him work too much. We don't want the head to get too big. After the Gold Cup, where he was literally given the best young player and the Golden Boot, like, yeah, you're gonna not play a lot.
Yeah, and I have a lot of people compliment them in their handling of Alphonso Davies, who turned 17 yesterday. Not a great birthday present for the young man.
No, it would have been if he scored.
That means one year until he's eligible to be transferred, to get the transfer certificate. Now, whether he's going to get those offers elsewhere if he doesn't play again remains to be seen. But I don't think there's any excuse. If they do the same thing with him next year, I'm going to have issues with it, because we saw what he can do at the Gold Cup. we saw what Vancouver wasn't able to create much of anything in this playoff series. Would it not have been a good idea to have the guy that was busting things open for Canada, of all places, in that Gold Cup in a MLS playoff game to perhaps create some space, to create some entertainment value at least? Would that not have been something that could have been useful for them? It's hard to argue that it wouldn't be. And I question, at some point you got to take the mittens off, right? Good enough, you're old enough. And it's not the only problem with the Whitecaps by any means. I'm not suggesting that, but it's sort of a symptom of an overall sort of philosophy of kind of, reaching for the middle, which I don't really completely understand. And hopefully, at least when it comes to Davies, both for Vancouver's sake and for Canada's sake and for his sake, they do take those reins off a little bit next year.
Now, Duane, let's just talk. It's Friday, and there's some playoff games on Sunday. Let's quickly go through the matchup and give our quick predictions for the second leg of the semifinals of each conferences this Sunday. TFC New York Red Bulls at 3 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. What do you expect?
I think that the final aggregate score is going to be 5-2 for TFC, and it'll be a fairly comfortable, not a complete blowout, but I don't think that there will be much sweating in the stands. It'll be a celebratory 14 Celsius, so it's going to be quite the day. You're until 14 Celsius in November. No global warming at all. Anyway, it's going to be a good day at the thing. I predicted 3-1 or 2-1, 3-1 was my prediction heading into this. I'm going to stay with that.
Now, moving on to NYCFC and Columbus. Columbus having a 4-1 aggregate lead coming into the second leg. Any chance NYCFC and David Villa makes it a game and brings a few goals back and maybe makes it a thriller to finish the game?
I don't think there's any chance that NYCFC wins this tie, but I do think that for a variety of reasons, obviously the change in venue, New York has played fairly well at home this year, and the fact that by just complete instinct and the nature of being up 4-1, that there's probably going to be a slight letdown by Columbus. So I expect NYCFC to win this game. Maybe 2-0. Let's call it 2-0, which will make the aggregate 4-3, which will sort of look close, but not really be close.
Yeah, it will be score effect at that point. Columbus will be happy to let New York play and see what they can do. Now, we're going to have to need a winner in this one. It's 0-0. Are we going to see penalties in Portland tonight?
This is a funny one because of the injuries that happened to Portland in the first leg to try and handle it. Portland's a better team, and they have the better player. And normally, when you're trying to handicap a series, whoever has the best player is sort of a tiebreaker in your mind. But with the injuries that are out there for the Timbers, I do give Houston a chance for this. They've been a little bit better on the road in the second half of the season. Still look great, but they're not quite what they were in the first half. So I'm not going to go right out of the... Yeah, I'm really going on. I'm straddling that fence so hard it's starting to hurt. So I probably should make a final call here. I do think Portland will pull this out, but I think that this will go at least into extra time. And yeah, let's go that. Not penalties, but it'll go into extra time, and Portland will just nick it.
All right, and to quickly finish off the week, let's quickly take a look at the Premier League this weekend. It's a pretty quiet weekend, but a few games are catching my attention. West Ham Liverpool. Kind of hope West Ham can get out of the troubles they are in now, and Liverpool is getting hot slowly but surely. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a tough game, but let's move to Sunday because the interesting games happens on Sunday. We got two games that are really interesting, kind of have title implications but not. Man City, Arsenal. If Man City wins, Arsenal will not win the league, that's for sure. And Chelsea, Man United. Chelsea with a win can bring themselves at least closer to United, not necessarily closer to City, but those two big games on Sunday.
Yeah, Wenger is already sort of playing mind games. He's talking about City going TFC, City going having an undefeated season here, and how he doesn't think that they have a chance. Which is the only reason he's bringing that up is to try.
Because I had one. I had a undefeated season, so I think it's okay for us. But Man City are not going to have an undefeated season,
they have 11 draws or something in that. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It's undefeated, but it's not like
there's
perfect.
It's not the most points. Chelsea had the most points, 103, correct? I have to look that one up to confirm that, but at any rate. Yeah, look, it's an interesting game, and only in the sense that the historical sort of matchup favors Arsenal greatly, but the current form, it's not even close. City should be expected to go in and grab a hold of this one, and should be. Now, look, if Chelsea takes points off United and City wins that game, then you're looking at even a greater stretch in that title race, and we're starting to really. Well, we were having these conversations last year just with Chelsea. Chelsea got 9 points up in November, and we were trying to make an argument in our head whether the title race is over. And the only argument I can come up right now, if City does get up close to two figures or double figures, there is that City can't possibly run away with the title because they're City, and that's not really an argument. That's a fear.
That's called PTSD.
Yeah. So it'll be an interesting game for sure. And look, I think that the Arsenal City game has the potential to be entertaining. I have a feeling that the United Chelsea game is not going to be entertaining at all.
Yeah, it'll be pretty much just a game where if Chelsea wins, it at least gives Chelsea a chance to bring back. If Manchester United win, it kind of eliminates Chelsea from title contention altogether, and then even Europe's going to be not necessarily difficult, but you find yourself closer to fourth than you were to third, and that will happen with a defeat. But there's a few problems now. We have teams like Chelsea and Real Madrid struggling in the leagues. Manager like Conte and Zidane on a hot seat, and people are actually talking, who's going to get the sack first? And well, neither. Conte's not going to get sacked, and Zidane, really? Come on.
Yeah, well, I will say this, that Zidane is maybe the only you have to be of Zidane's stature to survive what's happening in Real Madrid right now. If it was any other lesser, if it was a mortal human, basically, if it wasn't a literal walking god, that he'd be fired by now. But no, Zidane probably has a very long leash because he's one of the top 10 greatest living footballers, right?
I would go top 5. I would even maybe go as far as top 5.
Yeah, so he's going to get a bit of a leash that way. But even the great ones will get fired eventually if they don't turn it around. And there's not a lot of patience at Real Madrid.
All right, Duane. So we'll be back on Monday to talk about the results in Major League Soccer, in the Premier League, and whatever else is going on in the world of football with a soccer perspective. As always, you can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. You can find the on-demand version of all the shows we do at sportspodcastingnetwork.com, online, iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Store. Just look for Soccer Today SPN or the Sports Podcasting Network. As always, until next time, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.